Alrighty. Then I guess picking off where it had last been, Quentin was about to, I guess starting from the beginning, the entire group, save for that of the likes of Quentin and Jubei, are all resting asleep inside of whether it be a very exclusive and extravagant tent or sleeping bags, like the rest of the normal members. But in this particular watch, one of the last, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's just the two of them, Jubei and Quentin, up having a bit of a conversation. Quentin, in particular, seeming to be a bit evasive with what he wants to talk about, but in that particular, his evasiveness is exactly where we are starting off. I suppose my... Well, let me ask you this, Jubei. You are interested in everyone's well-being. That is something that I look up to you for. But can you say that you are truly involved with your own?
Jubei looks over, then kind of looks up in the night sky, showing that he's giving that question some serious thought.
If I were to be honest with you, Quentin, if you had asked me that question as little as a month or two ago, the answer would have been, well, I would have given you the same answer, but the answer would have been a lie. Yes, I do believe I am thinking of taking care of myself, but unlike 2 months ago, I think it's more true now. I believe... No, I am certain that I want to continue, and the only way to do that and better myself is to make sure that I am taking care of myself as well. Or at least so I believe.
Now, I would be inclined to believe you, but you say this, but part of me is still questioning. You say this, but, and while as strong as you are, and as I have seen you perform, there are still actions, tactics, and people that make me believe otherwise.
I would assume you are speaking about my little experience throwing out the guards during the assault on the castle when we tried to save the Empress.
Perhaps that, yes, but it's more than just that. You move about, and while, of course, you are strong, you are, I'd say, in terms of dragon chest, you would be that, similar to that of a queen. A very powerful piece, but one that must be carefully utilized. You may be a queen, but you are played like that of a pawn. You move yourself, sometimes I believe, with less care, seeing yourself as only that of a piece. of defense, of protecting the rest of us, which is admirable. But whether or not it is necessary is another question altogether.
I see. I understand where you are coming from, Quentin, but
He kind of looks over,
a queen piece.
smiles to himself.
Davia would probably find that most amusing. But
His face doesn't seem to move too much at that. He kind of is just staring at the fire, seemingly with a bit of a somber look.
Yeah, Jubei kind of goes,
sorry, I do not mean to make light. Quentin, you say that when I shield all of you, that you think it may not be necessary, that perhaps I take bigger risks than I should for these. Is that your concern?
Perhaps. It's just that sometimes I, even as well as you do, there is a nice part and a not so nice part as being the party's healer. It is nice because that means that I have the ability to bring you up, take you back from your lowest and put you back at your highest. The not so nice is that I have to begin with. It is a position I am used to, governing over the forces of life and death, making sure that all things are to proceed in the favor of that of Estes and the agency that she had given me. But at the same time, I understand why you put yourself out there. I just wish I didn't have to see it. It is not particularly enjoyable to see my friends getting hurt on the battlefield.
Jubei looks over at you, kind of gives a bit of a knowing nod and goes,
I see, Quentin. I suppose I did not take that into account as much as I should have for you. It is difficult to see us getting injured, I suppose.
he's got to look over towards the tents where everybody else is asleep.
Do you want to hear the funny thing, Quentin? I am in a...
His eyes... Oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Yeah, you can say what you look like.
Oh, his eyes kind of flick up to him for just a moment before looking back down.
You may not realize this, but out of everybody here, with maybe the exception of Ayla and Esteban, but they are fairly new to joining us in these adventures, I am in a rather unique position to know what you are talking about. Before you joined us, Quentin, I was the one who had to bring up the others when they went down. I had to heal their injuries. I had to watch them suffer for the pain. and keep them from, well, the Sentinel of Death's door, as you sometimes put it. And perhaps that is the reason why I take more liberties with my safety. Because when it was just me especially, I was the only one that could prevent them from dying like that.
You see a kind of a painful yet sad yet almost fond memory face across his face as he kind of has like a nervous chuckle, as if, as he kind of looks over his shoulder nervously.
To be honest, you would not believe how many times I had to nearly watch Davia well, not get back up again. At least 5 separate occasions I can think of that if I had not been there, I know Davia would not be. That goes for some of the others as well.
He kind of nods a little bit. But again, kind of at the mention of her name, kind of sighs a little bit. I suppose.
Can Jubei insight that sigh? Because he's a little curious at that.
Go ahead.
He's gonna guidance himself.
Isn't that like a actual spell that you can see people applying on themselves?
True, but you don't know what I'm doing it for. For all you know, I'm taking watch.
He's seen it several times.
Look, you know I'm guiding myself, but by the same time, you don't know whether I'm making an insight check or if I'm guiding myself because I'm trying to look around the woods and prevent us from being ambushed and killed, is all I'm saying.
So his eyes aren't going to be staring directly at Quentin as he does this.
Maybe he's just trying to see if you got something in your teeth.
I'm going to give you the benefit of the fact that he's been staring at the flames. Okay.
That's true, yeah. Here we go. 18!
God damn it. I got a 16, and then you're fucking... Anyway, the sigh... Quentin's not necessarily someone who particularly shows much emotion on his face, save for a smile. You frankly have never seen him anything other than happy or sad. Anger only coming off as coldness, but in that particular case, you would probably notice his eyebrows kind of furrowed just a tiny bit, and the sigh comes off not necessarily as irritation, but frustration. I'd say only being too higher. It's unclear if it's because of him, her, or if it's because of you, her, or himself.
Okay. Jubei kind of looks at that and goes,
I can't help but notice, Quentin, when I mentioned Davia, you had a bit of a frustrated sigh. Is everything alright?
He kind of looks up at you for a moment, seemingly almost with like a little bit of surprise, I'd say, before he kind of rubs a little bit at his arm. Well, remind me again. How did you and Davia meet?
Ah, well,
Junpei kind of looks a little bit.
uh, it wasn't exactly the most equable of meetings, one could say. Um, in fact, when we first met her, she was working for a group of mercenaries trying to kidnap our ward from us so they could get a reward. That was actually moments before we met the Black Knight who has been chasing down Everin and the other demigods. But after he had come there and stolen the demigoddess and showed his power, Davia had little else to go, so we needed assistance and help back in numbers, so Davia just joined us in our little endeavor back to the city. And after that, me and her had a few drinks and yada yada yada.
Actually, what was she like back then? Any different from now?
I would say most definitely yes. Though she would most likely rather die than admit that. Back then, Quentin, though she
Stops to think.
let us put it this way. Back then, Davia, the show she has now of not caring for the others, a way of seemingly to be dismissive of everyone but herself. It was not merely an act back then. She had no trust for us, and I am fairly certain her first thoughts were, how can I use these people to my advantage?
Junpei looks
Are
like
you certain that isn't her current way of thinking?
Junpei looks over at Quentin with a smile. Goes,
As I would say, Quentin, I could still see how you would think that. But the fact of the matter is, Davia,
and he looks over.
you do not know much about Davia's past, do you, Quentin, correct?
You are right, I do not.
What do you know, if you do not mind me asking?
Well, I don't believe she's told me anything herself. I suppose not much at all, other than that she has pirate connections.
Well, this is hardly a secret. It is not so much connections. Davia was very much a pirate herself. One apparently known as the Blood Eagle.
He takes a sigh as he says that.
It was a name she had for committing a sort of
Then he kind of looks a little uncomfortable.
torturous execution, I suppose, is the best way to put it. Do you know of this practice?
For a moment, he seems to have gotten a little lost in the flames. He doesn't seem to respond.
In any case, Quentin, Davia
Hmm.
has done many dark things in her past. And she did many evil things, I will not lie. But
And he looks into the flames with him.
there was a...
He kind of stops as he thinks and takes a deep breath.
I will tell you this, if only to ease your mind, though. I do not believe Davia has mentioned this to anyone else besides myself, but Davia did not choose to be a pirate, Quentin. She was a small girl who, at an age she cannot even recall, had her parents taken from her by the very men that raised her and took her to her ship. She could have probably been no more than 3, maybe 4 years old. And the captain she admires so much turned her into a monster for his own personal gain, I believe.
Jubei looks over at Quentin.
Many people, I believe, would look at Davia and just see the thing that the man created. But when I am around Davia, I see the child, the girl, the innocence. It is there, and it is very well deeply hidden and scarred. But there is goodness in her for it. Oddly enough, I seem to have saw that the first day we met.
He kind of laughs.
Though to be honest, I could not tell you why I had such an inkling when I met her.
And he kind of smiles and just goes,
It might be by the very simple fact that when we first met, I could tell, just could tell that Davia was pained by my pain, by my story. And a monster does not feel empathy for another.
I suppose you are right. But... And he kind of looks up over at Jubei, dark eyes kind of hovering over his before looking back down at the crackling fire. Even though you speak of this, the only thing that worries me, though, is that, from what it sounds like, she was also the one who had primarily had you worried.
Are you referring to she was the one who primarily put her own life at risk and put herself in extremely dangerous situations?
I was doing the thing that most people call putting it lightly.
Jubei
But
kind of
yes,
smiles at that. He goes,
Yes. That was a thing I definitely saw in Davia, Quentin. It is one of the things that drew us to each other. Quentin, we both wanted to die. Not just her, but me as well. And oddly enough, seeing that in Davia made me not want to do it anymore myself, perhaps.
even if Davia herself were to die.
Jubei kind of looks over at you with that statement and goes,
That is a rather loaded question, is it not?
He kind of squints a little bit before his eyes kind of return back to normal. It is a question nonetheless. Do you think that your will to continue living would be hampered if she no longer was?
Jubei Bat looks back into fire.
If I'm to be honest with you at this time, I am not certain.
And he stops and goes,
And believe it or not, Quentin, that is an improvement from what you would have said earlier. Because again, earlier I would have said it most definitely was dependent on Davia's life.
You know, Jubei, an interesting thing about Sentinels is their different ways in which they carry out their God-given talents. I have chosen to differentiate the means in which death is able to be dealt to others, simply not focusing on that in particular. I believe you were there when I had told you about my past, correct?
I was, yes.
I believe maybe part of my reason that it is so difficult for me to understand exactly what you are talking about is because, well, you and Davia wanted very much to die, whereas in my lowest moments, all I wanted was to live. So, I suppose that provides certain insights and things that we are not able to understand of one another. But one thing I suppose I do have an insight for is that when you want to live, it comes from the very core of your being, not given to you by any 1, 2, 3, or none. It is simply given to you by yourself. A primal urge to continue to force oneself forward, no matter how tough the current. I have seen the way that the two of you have interacted, in particular when each time you went down, Davia, rather panicked, would demand me to bring you back up. Now, of course, before I held no curiosity for that behavior. After all, I thought it was touching to see how much one could care for another being. But now I worry. If I'm to be completely honest with you, when you say that she has changed, that the husk does not match the woman inside, I find myself feeling skeptical. The things that she says, the things that she does, and the actions that she pursues all seem to be reminders of that past that you speak of. I believe I have ignored all of them, up until she had made comments towards those children, which oddly enough you had seemingly brushed off as nothing odd. Why do you think that?
Chubby kind of looks over at you and gives a not a sigh, but kind of a knowing nod.
I see. And I think we have finally gotten to the meat of the concerns then. I know for a fact Davia is not good with children. I think that might have to be to a simple fact that Davia was, in a way, never a child herself. But I suppose that is besides the point. The fact is, Quentin, I didn't find it odd because in my own mind, or at least in my own heart, what Davia said wasn't meant to be cruel or callous, I don't believe, but more, how to put it? I believe Davia just didn't understand the issue, perhaps. I am faltering with my words.
You are saying that she does not understand the severity of some of the things that she does.
In some cases, I believe that is very much true.
Jubei kind of pokes the fire a bit.
Let us put it this way, Quentin. Do you remember when you apologized for not understanding a few of the social norms we had when we first met?
Yes.
Well, for Davia, it is like that, but amplified 1,000-fold, perhaps. Again, she was raised by pirates. She was raised in a way that life was meaningless and cheap. And she was raised that you either kill or be killed. There was no exceptions. It's not an excuse, obviously, but it does well to understand where someone like that comes from. And to be honest, I see it if no one else does. Ever so slowly, Davi is changing from that thought process.
Are you truly certain?
Jubei kind of looks over at Quentin and has a light smile on his face.
You would notice that his face is, in contrast, knit with concern.
You are worried for me, I see.
He
Kind of
nods.
Let me put it like this, Quentin. Am I certain Davia is changing? Yes, that I am certain of. Am I certain that she will be able to, how to put it, for the sake of exaggeration, become a ordinary member of society, I suppose? I am certain that that is not the case either. But I do have faith that the good person that Davia is will shine through. Will do so more as she gets used to a better, normal life again. People can change, Quentin. For better or for worse.
I do agree. Something that I saw very often back at the graveyard is often how people have changed. Death and dying is something that brings a very interesting perspective to life. I would see some others mourning over caskets, sometimes fighting, yelling, screaming, to the point where my father and I would have to break up any of the encounters. But at the same time, I've also seen smiles, whether they be understanding, spiteful, or melancholic towards the person in the casket. Death, I find, is oftentimes something that can evoke the biggest change in others, and therefore has provided me with plenty of insight regarding the nature of people. But with one thing I find, I suppose it worries me. Because while you say that there is real change, evolution occurring within her, even though it may come from the perspective of someone who is not within a romantic inclination with her, I personally, with everything that I have seen and haven't seen, I will not give myself off the illusion of being all-knowing. I find it difficult for me to see that. All I do know is that her reckless behavior in the past may have been a direct contributor towards your current behavior in disregard for your own safety. Whether or not she may be changing, and maybe you've been changing her for the better, you have to remember that change is a two-way street. You've become a happier person, and, well, I can see it within your smile. And his face lessens a little bit, becoming more neutral. But can you honestly say you haven't picked up any bad habits along the way?
Jimmy kind of looks slight head tilt over at Quentin and smiles and goes,
You think that I've been picking up bad habits from Bavia, have you?
He nods.
Junpei's going to reach into his bag that, he's always had, and he's going to pull something out. And what you're going to see is a gourd.
Do you know what this is, Quentin?
I am not familiar. Is this another Nipponese thing?
Indeed.
He hands you the bottle.
Just take a sniff of it.
He kind of moves it around first. Is it filled with anything?
There's a slight slosh on it.
He moves his nose over.
You smell the most foul, strong, pungent alcohol, cheapest shit that is known as gut rot you could find.
He sniffs it, exhales. interesting smell.
You can
One
say
moment.
you can say it as it is, Quentin. The stuff smells terrible. I am quite aware.
No, it's... Remember, it's not exactly only my sense of, touch that is a bit hampered. Though clearly I had a physical reaction. For a moment I thought that was poison, which, from what you've told me, isn't entirely inaccurate.
Yeah, it really isn't. Quentin, before I met Davia, this gourd was filled every day and emptied every night. And I mean every day. I used to get, and this may be hard for you to believe, in bar fights every day. In fact, the whole reason I am on this wild, crazy adventure I am on is because when I was in an inn, drinking myself into a stupor, I punched a guard in the face, breaking his nose. And I had a choice. I could either help serve in this caravan that they needed me to have because they were underarmed, or I could go to prison. I picked the former. I drank myself so I could sleep, so I could try to dull the pain of my life, and so that I could just keep moving one more day. After being with Davia for a while, I stopped drinking. And you know another thing? Davia used to do the very same thing. In fact, again, that is more or less how we met. We were drinking together as we drunk ourselves into a stupor to forget the nightmares. But since we've been with each other,
Then he looks at the bottle.
we barely ever drank again. In fact, I can't even tell you the last time we drank like that.
I apologize if this is a bit on the nose, but... Has there ever been an incident in which a fight has resulted in drinking? Have the two of you ever fought?
He looks over with a bit of an odd.
Do you mean from drinking or the fact that we just enjoy a good punch-up once in a while? Because we fight all the time as
I
practice.
meant a romantic drabble.
Over drinking? Never. We never
No.
actually had a drunken fight.
No, you... As a couple,
Ah,
have the two of you ever fought, which had resulted in the latter? Former.
I see.
He stops and thinks.
A fight? No, there has never been.
And he emphasizes the word.
There has never been a fight that resulted in us drinking. There have been a few talks, on the other hand.
I see.
And to be fair, those talks resulted in the drinking.
Kind of takes a deep breath.
Those were actually before, but me and Davia worked out exactly how we felt about each other.
But it was still while the two of you were mingling.
Yes. It was a few times. Not many, though.
I suppose. I suppose I'm just worried. It's the entire reason why I've started this conversation to begin with. But I don't know. There was something about what she had said in regards to that of the children that, I suppose, made me realize more about her, which is given more context thanks to what you had said. But that, and past Tor, that word. He kind of looks a little uneasy, and for the man who looks at death for the most part all day, that's rare.
Quentin, can I tell you one more story about Davia in the earlier days?
Okay.
You speak of the way she treated the children, and that seemed to upset you. If I may be so bold as to say.
I would agree.
Do you remember Victor's children? You know who I mean. Fernando and the others.
The Minotaurs, if you're wondering, Judah.
Yeah.
The Minotaur children that Victor is raising. You know how
Yes.
Did you hear the story how we came to adopt them?
No.
We were out adventuring. Actually making our way towards the very keep you met us at. When we came across an ambush of Minotaur attackers. We were forced to fight them, and in the end kill them. We then decided that we needed to discover who and what they were coming from. We hunted them down and found them in their lair. There, we soon discovered that they were worshipping a red dragon and were attacking and killing innocent people on the road. We decided that the best course of action at the time was to defeat the Minotaurs and to destroy the dragon before it can cause more harm. But when we were in the attack and killing the Minotaurs, we happened to come across those 3 young children. Too young to know what was happening, too little to know what was going on.
He looks over.
It was Davia that saved those children and took them with us, not me.
He kind of nods at that. Not with any particular discerning emotion necessarily appearing upon his face, but he nods.
He... Yeah. You see what I mean, Victor? There is goodness in Davia. And you must not always listen to the words she says. But with Davia, it is more important to look at the actions she takes.
I suppose. Even though he says that, it's not much of a stretch to say that he does look a bit saddened.
Jubei would kind of go,
Is something still bothering you, my friend?
It's difficult to say exactly what I mean. I don't particularly partake in the affairs of the living, only affairs of the dead, so there is no grieving nor letting go that, well, has to happen at times, I suppose. The only thing that I suppose bothers me is that if I'm to speak my mind, and I apologize for such, when you speak of her, you speak of her highly, and I completely understand that. And even with the question that I had asked, of course, one's constitution would be utterly shaken if their loved one was taken from them. But I suppose the thing that brings me the most worry is that of, well, when you had said that, when I had asked the question, let's start there, that you had not picked up any habits from her, you went off with an example, but you hadn't answered my question neither.
Jubei kind of smiles and nods.
That is fair. If you are talking of things I have definitely picked up from Davia, I probably have learned to speak my mind a little too much when... Yeah. But if you are talking about the reckless death behaviors, I had those way long before I met Davia. If anything, they are less now than they were.
He kind of just shakes his head, kind of he was kind of holding his hands out in front of the flames at first. Really not too much effect, considering he's not great at feeling warmth, but bringing his hands together, he kind of puts both of his hands and kind of grabs his elbows. Then I suppose this was all for naught, then.
He looks over to you.
Well, what was for naught, Quentin?
This conversation, I don't believe I was... I suppose I may have brought this up for no particular reason if I was simply ignorant.
You were not ignorant, Quentin. And this conversation was necessary, I believe. And
he smiles and he puts a hand on your shoulder.
it does mean a lot that you do care enough about me that you were concerned. Perhaps,
And he kind of stops and thinks,
perhaps the other way to look at this is, as you said, I may be blind to the situation. Okay. Perhaps I have picked up habits I'm unaware of because of Davia. It is possible, but
he kind of looks over at you and goes,
I at least believe that I am not fighting to kill or even to die, but I fight to live at this point. And If you think that...
Oh, sorry.
I suppose then that my main worry is how strong that foundation of yours stands. I only learned how much I wanted to live when my life was being taken away. Unfortunately, one could say that I was too late in my endeavors. But I'm still here, I suppose. What has happened that makes you think that you won't slip back into past habits in the event that she were to go? Or vice versa, if it were her. If it were you.
To be honest, Quentin, I don't know if there is anything like that. I am going to ask you another question, and I don't expect you to know this, but I'm assuming you do not know much about Lebanese culture.
I do not.
You speak of, well, for the lack of the better term, we call suicide at the moment, and taking one's life as meaningless is a horrible and unimaginable thing. And in this culture, it very much is, but in Nippon, it was not uncommon for those that failed to take their own life in recompense for their failures. Life is a different, how should I say? It has a different value in my home country. It might simply due to the fact that life ends there at the drop of a hat. But
Kind of smiles and chuckles.
let me put it this way, Quentin. Do you remember I told you what happened to me when I left my island? I am pretty sure I told you that story.
If you would remind me, that would be nice.
Very well. I was part of the Order of the Sun, a group of soldiers and children who are taken in by temples to become warriors to fight off the demons of our homeland. Upon the day when I was to graduate and become a full Order member, me and the woman I had loved at the time, a woman named Sakura, we left to, well, how should I say, perform our final task, which was to, by ourselves, go and kill a wandering horde of demonic creatures. When this happened, I entered the home. Sakura and I found the creatures. Minor demons, nothing too dangerous. We were easily able to dispatch them. But it was a trap, Quentin. You want minor demons there for the purposes of just killing. For whatever reason, Skygore had lured me and Sakura out to that village on the day of my graduation, on the day we were supposed to ascend to true members of the Order.
I remember now. I was unaware that it was on an island.
Well, my home is in country and an island in itself.
Oh, I was unaware.
That's all right, but when she died, after what occurred, Quentin, I should have killed myself according to my culture. And to be honest, the only reason at the time I could remember why I didn't was because I wanted to kill Skygore more than I wanted to die. I had a rage that kept me alive and strong, but that rage was only there for one purpose. So I could kill Skygo. And I knew in my heart that once that mission was complete, the rage that sustained my purpose for living would have been gone. Do you understand what I mean by that?
I believe I do, but even then, continue.
Well, that was truth. That rage was an inferno in me and kept me going. But things are different now. And they are different in more than just Davia. You are right to be worried that if I died, or if Davia died, one or the other of us would possibly lose that need of life we have when we are with the other. I cannot speak for Davia. I would not want Davia to die, obviously, if I should perish. But I also am very much aware there is nothing I could do one way or the other that would prevent her from doing it, obviously. But for me, things are slightly different. At least they are for now. I mentioned to you earlier about my visions with Skygor and this whole chosen champion of tranquility, correct?
Yes.
Well, with it, I have to come to the understanding that this world isn't everything, and its pleasures are fleeting too. It does not mean you do ignore them, of course, and it does not mean those pleasures are not there for a reason. But if I am ever to become a warrior of tranquility, I will have to learn how to live, even if the reason I want to live is not there anymore.
Kind of gives a weird tilt to his head. He goes,
I am not certain if that helps you or not with your concerns, Quentin, but perhaps the better way to... Oh,
I suppose I only have one last thing particularly to say, then.
yes, Quentin.
Remember how I have said that every sentinel that exists has their own means of dealing with things?
Yes?
In particular with myself, my way of dealing with judgment is, I believe, in a concept known as the twin essences of death. Do you know about this?
I do not.
The twin essences of death. Well, you've probably heard me once say this phrase, never one without the other.
I do recall you saying that, yes?
That is the key phrase for that said belief. The belief goes is that there are two types of death. Peaceful, willing death, like that of growing old and simply passing away, or succumbing to whatever forces may have caused said death to become true. And then there are savage deaths. Death in the form of combat. Death from whether it be a rabbit running away from a fox that is pursuing it. The line between that of savagery and the line of that of surrender whether it be conscious or unconscious, are what I consider to be the twin essences of death. They are what I use to, as I have told Everin once, to give death more meaning, as it is such a thing that is oh so difficult for many those who are living to understand, even myself to an extent. But one thing, one is incapable of existing without the other around, for they don't complement one another, they complete one another. They are both the same, and while they represent different things, they are still one another, death, at the end of the day. Unchanging and yet, oh so different. They give one another meaning by representing as the other's opposite, while still being the same, like how black and white are two colors considered to be opposites of one another, and yet, no matter how much you mix, every single shade of theirs is gray. I suppose that's what I represent, but moving to you, the twin essences of death are something that can be given to a concept, but I believe should never be applied to people. People, whether it be 1, 100, a million, or more, should always, in my personal opinion, try their best to live, either as themselves or in the groups, but all for the sake of existing, living for no other reason than simply existing. I suppose the fear that I feel, clenching and crushing at my heart at the current moment, is that the both of you have become the twin essences of death for one another, not complementing, but completing. And what fear I feel right now is that in the event where one of you disappears, the other will as well. The both of you mean a lot to one another, but part of what concerns me is that since neither of you wanted to live before either of you, and now both of you are given meaning through one another, what happens if that meaning disappears? When all else was taken from me, I found that above all else I wanted was to live. When I was bleeding out in the grassy field, cloudy, rain, mud, and, well, crimson covering me, pain didn't matter. The people that died along with me, that died besides me, didn't matter. The people who were pursuing me did not matter. I wanted to live more than anything. And even if it may have been through an incredibly unconventional method, I found the meaning of life for myself. Something that I don't think I could ever forget, regardless of whatever may happen. Can you say the same for yourself, that you have found the meaning for yourself?
I think
Jimmy kind of stops, looking back into the fire.
I think Honestly, Quentin, one can only find that meaning when the question is presented to them in a moment.
And he kind of looks over at Quentin and goes,
And I cannot speak for you personally, but I am not certain that, given the meaning again, if the question is presented more than once, is it not possible the meaning can change as well?
I believe meanings can change, but should never be applied to a being.
Maybe.
Jubei says with a dull nod.
I cannot tell you what you may wish to hear, Quentin. I don't know what would occur. It's a question I don't think I could know till it happens, but I suppose in the end, all I can do, or for that matter, any of us
Then he kind of looks at the group.
can do is push forward and hope we keep living. And still have a meaning, I suppose. But I do promise you this, Quentin. Should the day come when... If a day comes when...
And you see Jubei kind of having a hard time getting whatever the idea he's about to say across.
If a day comes when I am alone again, I will make you this promise if it helps. Before I do anything brash, I will speak with you first if that eases your mind at all.
I suppose it does. I'm sorry, Jubei. I didn't want to bring this up simply because I was under the impression that it would, I suppose, make you think less of me.
It does not in the slightest, Quentin. If anything,
He kind of smiles.
it makes me think more of you and not us in a way. You care, Quentin. As I said before, caring is essential, and it's the things you do that matters. Caring about my life and Davia's life is definitely something that shows. You are a good friend.
He has a bit of a frown, but despite the frown, and frankly despite the sadness evident in his eyes even still, he does look up and smile at Jubei a bit. Well, this is really only my first time at being a friend. Hoping I'm doing all right.
Better than money. But with that, I think
Jubei looks up at the moon.
But with that, I guess it's about time for us to wake up the last watch, eh? Can't let those lazy bones sleep in all day.
I suppose you're right. He kind of sits there for a moment, kind of rubbing his hands together. And he just kind of awkwardly opens his arms.
Junpei looks at him, smiles, and he goes in there and he just picks him up.
Oh, Jesus!
You are a good friend, Quentin.
I'm beginning to see what you mean.
Well,
Please
in
let me go. It's beginning to become difficult to breathe.
Oh, sorry, he puts you back down.
I do get a bit excited at times.
I see. He definitely seems a bit more elated, a bit surprised at the sudden picking up, but kind of at being let down. There's still a semblance of sadness still in his eyes, but even then, the smile still persists on his face. And he just says, "But I suppose I will make an attempt to see from your light and make another more educated observation the next time. I will probably bring this up to you again, but I want to be a bit more prepared before the next time, and, well, this is a difficult thing to necessarily word, but I do believe it would be rather painful for me if the chances of you living were diminished in any sort of way. That includes the others. If I were myself lost in whatever situation had brought me great danger, and there was little chance of retrieving myself, I personally would not want any of you to pursue me."
Junpei kind of gives you kind of a scowl.
Indeed, Quentin. And can I ask you a question?
Yes.
If the roles were reversed and I asked you not to pursue me, would you leave me behind?
Quentin stares at him for a moment. Before, oddly enough, despite the seriousness, a bit of a smirk appears on his face. And raising his hand, he lets some of the graveyard dust that more or less stains his gloves at this point simply begin to emanate and spin. Little swirls of blackness before turning into that of almost a whitish light. Begins to almost float above his hands like stars before fading back into the glove. Only if I would be unable to.
Junpei smiles back and,
And I make the same promise back to you then.
Though, at the same time, his eyes soften and sadden a little bit at that. Though, I don't suppose it would be improper for me to feel and wish that I could, even if I was unable to, though. Or is that wrong of me?
It is natural, Quentin. It is called regret. We all will have it. But remember, I can accept that it is impossible to save everyone. You'll have to accept it as well, obviously. But that doesn't mean we don't try our best to do it.
He nods at that. Well, I'm not sure how to say this in per se the most, ordinary standards, but you need not worry so heavily over everyone else's lives when that is my God-given service. You've been doing better with your delegation, but... And he kind of smiles. I suppose you would be putting me out of service if you were to take my job for me.
Jubei kind of smiles back and goes,
I don't know, that sounds rather selfish of you. Why should you be the only one to save their lives?
with a smile on his face.
For a moment, his eyes flick with fear until he kind of stops, squints. Was that sarcasm?
A bit.
He says it, he slaps him.
But in any case, I think we can both agree, Quentin, that it is the responsibility of everyone here to try to keep each other alive at the moment. We keep you keep us alive, and we keep you alive. That's what friends do.
It takes him a second, but he nods.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
I would say the only thing that I guess you would notice that would be kind of odd is that he does seem to nod to himself a lot with that particular case. But eventually he kind of puts his arms back at his side.
But you are right. We should probably wake up the others. Whose turn was it again?
Actually, do you remember, Judah? Because I forgot.
Me neither.
Okay,
If I remember correctly, the
I
first one... Okay, no. The first was Ayla and...
Estevan. Yeah. Okay. So I do know I do know Ayla
yeah.
and Estevan had a watch. No, it was Ayla and Everin.
Hill and Everin, yeah.
That's right. It was Ayla and Everin, and the last watch was Estevan and Ragnar.
Okay. So, I believe it was, Ragnar and, Estevan.
He looks over at the tent where he clearly saw Ayla walk into.
Do you
Don't
want to
worry.
go wake him up, or should I?
Oh, I'm sure I'll be able to, without at least making too much noise.
Fair enough. I'll get Ragnar.
Alright. And, Jubei.
Yes, Quentin.
Thank you for widening my perspective, though, on her. I've noticed that I seem to have a odd response whenever the subject of torture or abuse enters, and well, I understand that while she may have done that in the past, I am trying to see that she is not the same way now.
Jubei kind of nods and goes,
I see. As I said, try not to judge her harshly for what she did in the past. As I said, there's two Davias at the moment, remember? There's the one that the captain created, and there's the one that is just trying to get out and bloom. I've done my best to make sure the one that has been trapped inside is coming out is all. And I've said it to her before. To make that side of her come out, I would be willing to give her up.
That is good. Oh, sorry, my dog.
They be barking.
That is good. I apologize if it is harsh of me, but I'm glad, though. And I do not mean to have it seem as though I am specifically talking about her. If the roles were reversed, I would also be worried about her giving too much as well.
I am certain of that, Quentin. But in any case, let's wake the others up. It's been a long night.
And I think that's a good place to end her.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And we will stop recording